Hello, Saturday morning crew. Welcome to the Primal Previews panel. We're going to be talking about a couple upcoming books from the rulebook line, including Rage of Elements and Howl of the Wild. First, I'd like to introduce myself and the rest of this illustrious panel. I'm Logan Bonner. I'm the Pathfinder lead designer, kind of in charge of the Pathfinder rules in general. And I'm going to throw directly over here to James Case for the next introduction.
Hi everyone, I'm James Case. I'm senior designer at the Pathfinder Rules Lore team, and I'm really excited to talk about these two books we have coming up.
Hello, I'm Eleanor Farron. I am the senior designer on the Lost Omens line of the Rules and Lore team.
And I am Michael Sayre, the design manager on the Rules and Lore team here. So it's going to be exciting to get to tell you about all these cool things that my colleagues here have been cooking up for you.
Yes. So the first book we're going to talk about is Rage of Elements. And this book, we can show you the cover, and I'll also show you a little bit of the physical books that I have here in a little bit. But this gorgeous Wayne Reynolds illustration features some of the monsters of the plane of Earth, as well as our iconic kineticist Yoon. And these are going to be some major features of this book because it is all about the elements. That includes using the elements as a kineticist or an elementalist, or putting elemental monsters in your game, visiting the elemental planes, getting elemental spells and magic items. It's chock full of fun stuff to bring the big explosive power of fire and the unpredictable air and all of the other cool elements into your game. The major thing I think people are going to want to hear about from the player side is that kineticist class, which we play tested and got a bunch of cool feedback and brought back fan favorite iconic character Yoon. So I think first we're going to talk some about kind of the mechanics of the class and kind of what you can expect if you want to play a kineticist. So the kineticist is the master of the elements. Rather than being a spellcaster, they use impulses, which are magical abilities that are tied to specific elements. Here you can see the water impulses from the book. We'll leave this up here a little bit so everybody can read it really, really fast. And these are kind of special actions that they get. They can use them at will, and they really get to specialize in a certain element. They don't have, the once per day I get to fireball everybody. They have some cool fire stuff they can do all the time. Mike, I'm going to throw it to you to talk a little bit about some of your work on the kineticist. There's a fair amount of work from everybody on the design team on these, but I want to get your take on what you think is cool about this class.
So one of the things I really had a lot of fun working on for the kineticist was the composite impulses. These are new impulses. People didn't really get to see these during the playtest that combine multiple elements. And for better or worse, Logan really let me go surprisingly wild on these. So there's some really fun stuff in here. The ambush bladderwort, which is a wood and water composite blast that allows you to create basically a giant plant that encapsulates an enemy and then starts drowning them. The whirling grindstone, which combines metal and earth to create a spinning top that, I feel like the title kind of says it, right? It is a whirling grindstone. And just a lot of really fun stuff like that. The kineticist can be a master of a single element, but also has this ability to kind of combine elements in ways that I really tried to make as thematic and fun as possible. A lightning rod impulse where you throw a piece of metal at an enemy and then it calls down a bolt of lightning. This is going to be one of those classes where I think everybody who touched it really just was like, what is the coolest thing I can do here? And page to page, every time I flip through this class, I'm like, oh gosh, this is so cool. I can't wait to play this kind of kineticist. Oh gosh, this is so cool. I can't wait to play this kind of kineticist. It feels like a class that I'm going to play a lot of versions of and still have things that I want to do with it that I haven't done yet for quite some time to come.
And I think that some of this also might come from, I know, Logan, how you kind of wanted to start this kind of design process all the way back into last year, where Logan was basically like, okay, everybody make whatever you want a kineticist to be. We'll kind of do an alpha play test. And so some of these abilities were literally Mike being like, I think this would be cool. And some of them were like, I want to be able to do this kind of thing. And so that's really kind of where we started with what are cool elemental ideas.
Yeah, we kind of synthesized those into the playtest kineticist, and then after fan feedback on that one, we kind of went back to it and were like, okay, how do we amp up the cool things and make it kind of easier to play and clearer in how it works. As Mike mentioned, there's the composite impulses. There's actually a spread of the book for each element, and then one at the end for composite. So like this is the metal spread, and then right next to it is the fire spread. And you can see there's also a very cool page border. I don't know if it'll show up on stream, but this is a really gorgeous looking book too. So if you want to get into an element, you're going to have a whole bunch of options, and you can combine elements. With 6 elements, there is just a huge amount of variety you can make for your character. You can say, I'm going to be all about water, or you can say, I'm going to try to get all 6 elements eventually in my character's lifespan. You have a lot of cool ways you can go with it.
Yeah. I see there's a person in the chat who's saying that they really just want to play a magma kineticist, and they might be really interested in composite impulses like lava leap and molten wire,
Yeah. There's the kind of the core structure of the class. We've talked about this some after the playtest. It changed a bit from the playtest. The main thing you're going to be doing is activating a kinetic aura, which is kind of just the elements are always flowing through you, coming from a kind of kinetic gate within you. One of the things we really wanted to convey with this class is kind of what are the metaphysics of how this works? What is the story of you tapping into your elements? There's a lot of help, especially we had James and Mike activate anime mode to just kind of get like the cool theming out there and the cool names that are going to make it really feel evocative. So your kinetic aura is the first thing that you activate, and you just kind of have flames around you all the time if you're a fire kineticist, and that allows you to activate your impulses and kind of draw on elemental fire. There's a really fun dynamic with this class, and it's going to be cool to see how it plays with everybody else. Any final thoughts on the kineticist before we start talking about some of the rest of the book?
I think we could talk about Yoon a little bit. So if we could go back to the slide 2, I believe, with Yoon. Yeah, so, each one of our classes, of course, has an iconic, and this time we wanted to do something a little different. Time passes at the same rate in Golarion that it does in our real world. And so in first edition, our kineticist Yoon was a young girl. And, now it's been about 10 or so years. And so now she's all grown up. She's been adventuring around Tian Sha, and now she's found her way back to Huanggot. And she's ready to start the new chapter of her story. And I really like this art that we got from Wayne. I know we were like, well, what says I have all the confidence of like a teenager, but also all the confidence of somebody who can blast elemental fire out of their hands? And so, Eleanor, you and I, we were looking at some of the art, and we were looking at, like Korean street fashion, that kind of thing. So I really like her. And part of this is also because we are expanding the elements with wood and metal, in part because to tie in with the elements in Tian Sha, which we're going into a little bit next year. So, Eleanor, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the question, of course, is, well, why does Tian Sha know about the planes of wood and metal when nobody else seems to? And looking back through our setting, the answer was, well, no, Qi Zhong, the god of medicine and the elements, was the one who introduced that concept to Tian Sha. Well, of course, then the question comes, well, why does he know about it? So, really, the Rage of Elements book is connected to that entire continent in ways that just sort of run through most of the lore and flavor of it all. And just, that connection that is still maintained even though it was closed off. That the Imperial Dragons still have, even if the Sovereign Dragons cheat a little, and have slowly crept back into the setting to manifest kind of into this book. And so this book and the Tian Sha book that will be coming out will just sort of put together a bigger picture of both the elements and how they tie in to this entire continent that had very different philosophy than Avestan wound up having.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, one of
looking
the
at
things
the kind of
we do one of the things we do at the lore in this book is a lot of options are going to let you kind of choose your elemental philosophy. The main ones we go into detail on are the inner sea one, which is kind of the four elements that have kind of traditionally appeared in Pathfinder, and then the elemental cycle, which is earth, fire, metal, water, and wood. And a lot of options are going to let you kind of dig deep into one of those.
Yeah, I was
Over
just
to
gonna
you,
say I really
James.
like the spread of the different philosophies in the book, and it's something that really comes out, I think, once we start getting into the individual element sections.
Yeah, and we brought on Yvonne Xiao to do a lot of the work on kind of how we wanted to present the elements, what we wanted to do with the elemental planes, because we knew we wanted to go kind of beyond those four Greek elements. And she had worked on the Imperial Dragon, so it was like, oh, we know somebody who has already like kind of put her stamp on this already, and already has a lot of cool ideas on how to do with this. And she helped with a lot of the concepting of the new planes and how those philosophies were going to interact. So one of the things we have in this book is a chapter about each element, and the each one leads off with a really cool illustration of kind of a scene within that plane. So here you can see the start of the air chapter, and it begins with some lore, kind of by an expert within the world, talking about this place and some of the coolest bits of it. So there's one of those for each plane, including the two new ones of metal and wood, which is kind of brand new information that is going to have some cool new adventuring possibilities that weren't possible in Pathfinder First Edition or previously in Second Edition. The each of these chapters has that lore section. It has some new spells, quite a few of them for each element. Some new items, quite a few of those for each element, and then a pile of monsters tied to that element as well. I think I'm going to throw it back to Eleanor here to talk a little bit about kind of how those elements are also going to be appearing in the Tian Sha books we have coming up.
Well, we're going to be building on the concept of those elements in the character guide, and but also the understanding of these creatures, real dragons. This cycle is going to be running through that setting book, especially with the Imperial Dragons being connected very strongly to that cycle. They're all chained to an element to the point where the Sky Dragons are so metal, which I think may throw some people for a loop. But um,
Yeah,
yeah, we really
it's
get into the philosophies of that sort of thing.
yeah, we really took a lot of effort to kind of say like, okay, here's what the planes are like, but if you don't want to plane the planes and you just want to use this element, we wanted to kind of cover every level of things. So this isn't just a planar book; it's going to give you a lot of stuff for using the element for your characters and integrating into the rest of your game. I also wanted to mention, because I neglected to do so earlier, if anyone has questions in the chat. We are going to try to squeeze in some Q&A at the end if we have time, but please kind of save those toward the end if we announce the Q&A segment later on. James, I'm going to give you just a brief moment to talk about the section you worked on, which is the plane of water.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So I wanted to write some lore for this book, and I picked up the plane of water, which I think is a really cool place. I basically spent all of my life in the ocean growing up, so I was like, yeah, what would a world that's almost entirely underwater look like? And that's both, we have some places that were set up already. We have one of the cities is basically has towers that go up and are held within kind of an air bubble, and some that that's for the air breathing members of the city, and then it also has some that hang down into the water. So this kind of like, well, how does it work if I mean, barrier number one is you have to be able to breathe water in most places, which was something we had from first edition. But I wanted to kind of look at some of the like dangers of the plane of water, and so there are things like leech lakes that are kind of inspired by methane seeps, where like the water gets even denser than normal water, and nothing can live in there, and you look over and it's like, well, why are there a bunch of bones in this one section of the water? And why are all of these glittering magical treasures there that, still gripped in everyone's hands? That kind of thing. So I think it's going to be a fun area with, kind of places that are a little more peaceful and places that are definitely you're going to want your high level elemental magic to try and traverse.
Yeah. So one other thing we have a little bit of a teaser for one of the new elemental lords that appears in this book. We have the kind of deity entries for each elemental lord of both the 8 established ones and then 2 new ones for metal and 2 new ones for wood. This is Verilorn, also known as the custodian of oak and ash.
Not Tom Bombadil?
Not Tom Bombadil and not Treebeard from the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings either. But, if you want to roleplay him as such, you're certainly welcome to do so. So Verilorn is kind of a lonely gardener as a deity and has kind of a long-standing relationship with Shimunwe, the other deity of the other elemental Lord of Wood. The new ones I think are going to kind of provide some new stuff. The old ones were very dichotomous, and like their relationships have changed as the new elemental planes have opened up. But the new lords, really, we had a lot of fun possibilities with these, especially because they've been locked away for millennia upon millennia. I'm going to go really quickly to one last kind of bit on this section, which is the creatures and monsters that appear in this book. Mike, I'm going to throw it to you to talk about the one we see on the left there.
Yeah, so that is the Avalanche Legion, and they are an elemental earth troop. This book actually has troops for every single one of the elements. So if you're looking for having that kind of larger combat experience where you need hordes of elementals that are going to try and overrun your players, those tools are in here. And these Avalanche Legions, I think in particular, are going to be pretty fun for literally overrunning the players. They have some abilities like trample into the earth and pummeling boulders. You can see they are really just kind of, they've got that lower body. They're like a rolling boulder, and I just think they're going to be a lot of fun for people. This book really takes the kind of foundations of elementals that we created in the bestiaries, and then just goes all the way forward with them, expanding and filling in all of the little gaps and places that people are going to want to play in. A little quiet there.
Oh, sorry.
Logan?
Yeah, I'm back. I was saying we have a whole suite of metal and wood elementals. So they have a comparable number of elementals to the original 4, and we have a few new elementals for those original 4 elements as well. One of the new metal creatures, which is not in the elemental section, but is still an elemental, as many of the things in this book are, is that image you saw on the right there, which I'm going to throw over to Eleanor to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, that is the Capri Telex, assuming I pronounced that right. That is
It
from
is
the
now.
play.
You have established the official pronunciation right here.
No, I don't like doing that. So it is, well, like Logan said, it's from the plane of metal, and the plane of metal is actually very into decay. That metal is just sort of slowly and inexorably rusting and decaying over time. So it's kind of depressed, which is why I guess Logan threw it over to me to talk about. But as you can see, it's kind of like a cross between a Rubik's Cube and one of those books where you make a different creature by flipping the 3 sections, because it has these expressions on each segment of its head, and it sort of rotates them to change moods. Um, I'm also reminded of like the mayor from Nightmare Before Christmas, except with a whole lot more of a permutation. But it can rotate the eyes to be slightly angrier or more distressed, or rotate the mouth if it wants to yell at you, or just sort of like clam its lips. And it just kind of hangs out and is very depressed, and it of course shoots lasers out of its eyes, because something that looks like that has to shoot lasers out of its eyes, and each of its hand is made of a different metal, so if it reaches over and slaps you, it can be like, well, that was the cold iron hand. Are you vulnerable to cold iron, perhaps? No, let me try the silver hand. Uh, I I'm not sure you'd want to talk to them. I don't know if they'd be good company, but they are extremely cool.
They are a bit of wish fulfillment for anybody who's depressed and wants to be able to shoot lasers out of their eyes, which I think is probably a pretty common sentiment.
I mean, it's going to make your day better for a little bit.
I want to close out this discussion with one more monster, which is genies. So we've mentioned some that Rage of Elements is kind of the first book that is fully in sync with the remastered versions of the rules, and it's going to be in sync with the monster core. And that means that we've done some major changes to genies to kind of make them more of a Pathfinder specific type of genie. And Sharina Sharani came on as a consultant to work on those and to kind of come up with some really cool ideas for their new story and how they work in our world. And that's in addition to the 2 brand new types of genies, the Zura genies and the Kizithar genies for metal and wood. So you're going to see some brand new genies, and the monster core is going to have their full write-ups for the base genies. But we also put noble genies in this book, or for the new genies, we have both. So I'm going to very briefly flash that at the screen so people can take a bit of a look at that. That's the Zura genies, kind of made of flowing metal. That's one of the other themes of metal, is kind of that mercuriality, if you'll pardon the pun. And so you'll see some more on genies coming soon, and we're going to do a core preview document when Rage of Elements comes out that is going to have some of the information that is going to appear in Monster Core and Player Core. So last notes on Rage of Elements, you can pick this book up this summer, and there's also the special edition with the leatherette cover and the gold stamping that you can pick up. And I teased this briefly in yesterday's remaster panel, but I'm going to go ahead and show the planar diagram that we brought into this book. There's a labeled version on the inside, but this kind of shows you how all the planes relate to one another, and it's kind of an updated look from the first edition version of this diagram. So look forward to that, and kind of all the cool elemental stuff coming for you this summer. That, I think, is about going to wrap it up for Rage of Elements, and we are going to move on to James to talk about Howl of the Wild, a recently announced book. So tell us how that got announced and some of the cool stuff that's coming in that one.
Yeah, it was kind of tough because we had to announce this panel before we had announced Howl of the Wild, so we had to play it a little coy there. But yeah, Howl of the Wild is our most recently announced book. This is our latest creature book, focusing all about animals, beasts, and the natural world. And we announced this via a little bit of backstory into the book. Basically, this is the search of a naturalist for these 4 mythical entities called the Wardens of the Wild. And all we really have of them are these little records, and that kind of thing. So we have the Warden of Peaks and Skies, the Warden of Oceans and Rivers, the Warden of Forests and Meadows, and the Warden of Caverns and Burrows. So these are each kind of a large creature that's stewards over one of the great biomes of Golarion. And we have this book presented by a narrator named Barenthet. He is an Uruxi naturalist. He's somebody who maybe always was taken by these creatures, but life got in the way. He finds himself kind of later in life. It's kind of a out of shape professor, finally setting off on his first real grand adventure. So you'll see him aboard this fantastic airship, the Zoetrope, that was concepted in-house by Kent Hamilton. Fantastic design that really kind of takes a lot of cues from animals and that kind of thing. And with his crew of 6 kind of eccentric crew members, they're going to go around the world and they're going to try and go on this expedition. So I'm really excited about this book. Each one of the crew members is kind of has a lot of personality. I really love Barenthet, who was written very wonderfully by Simone Sully, who's also one of the edit leads on this book. And they're going to go see a bunch of monsters. So, it wouldn't be much of a creature book without a lot of creatures. So we have a lot to talk about. Logan, why don't I kick it to you for the first one that we're going to talk about?
Sure. The first creature that we're going to talk about is the Hydra. There are a lot of pieces of this book that are kind of taking these classic monsters, especially mythological monsters, and kind of doing an expansion and a new spin on it because, our crew is traveling the world and they're seeing all kinds of things that appear in weird, remote places and have strange powers. You can see this one kind of has a rainbow theme, so you can start to make some guesses on what that might mean. But there are some other variant Hydras in here that you're going to find interesting. There's one that can eat star metals. If you're familiar with the setting, you'll know those are kind of weird super metals. So it can get special abilities from eating those. There's another that is currently called the Mocking Chorus. I will note for all of this, like this book is still being worked on, so anything here is subject to change, as opposed to Rage of Elements, which is kind of set and off to the printer and all that. But the Mocking Chorus can kind of mimic creatures. These also have a cool presentation with some of these monsters kind of getting some scientific illustrations. James, do you want to really quickly talk about that before we continue on with the other monsters?
Yeah. So we really wanted to lean into this kind of idea of them on this expedition. A lot of kind of the old Darwin illustrations kind of came into play there. I think we have one a little bit later in the thing that we'll get to, but yeah, here we go. So this here is one of these illustrations. One of the characters on the crew, Chariclea, she is the scribe and she's a minotaur. And so, we have some of her illustrations and research notes. And I think this here is a cross section of a basilisk and, how its petrification powers might come out of its eyes and that kind of thing. You'll see a lot of this for the monsters where we've given this kind of expanded treatment that gives a little bit of fiction. The crew got lost somewhere and they had this encounter with this type of creature. In addition to the kind of monsters that we've written, totally new for this book or gone back and expanded.
Yeah, and
you brought up
so that's a couple of those.
Yeah, you brought up the Mocking Chorus, which I think is a good segue to our next creature, which is the spellsong Lyrebird. Eleanor, do you want to talk about how birds can be even worse?
Oh gosh. Actually, the most horrifying thing about the spellsong Lyrebird to me is that it's a grad student's failed thesis project. Because I know people in or who have been through grad school, and the idea of your final project turning into that much of a disaster right when you're trying to graduate is just stomach turning. But so the spell song lyrebird is based on many of the birds in real life that can mimic sound very convincingly. I mean, I'm sure that people know parrots and mockingbirds. Ravens are also known to imitate speech, crows, mynas. Um, the lyrebird, which some people have caught imitating the camera of the people who are taking pictures of them. And in this case, a bunch of wizards, because of course it was wizards, wanted to create a familiar that could help them cast spells using speech. Unfortunately, they were either too successful or rushed it or something went horribly wrong. They did not take their prerequisite humanity courses and think through what they were doing. The spell songbirds became able to cast spells independently and either fireballed their way out of captivity or charmed the grad students to get them out of the cage or any number of disasters, got out into the wild, and are now a hugely invasive species that can just sort of mimic a fireball spell that was cast by that it overheard and inadvertently explode you. And of course, birds are actually pretty smart, and so some of them are probably going to vertently explode you over a French fry.
Yeah, one of the big inspirations with this book is just there's kind of this idea of animals are a relatively basic creature type, and you look around the real world and you can see animals that can mimic camera shutters or can emit electricity around their bodies. Like these are things that normal animals can do in real life, and so we just took those as the inspiration, and then we turned the fantasy dial up on them. I think that brings us to our last creature.
I think anyone who
Yeah,
has
Eleanor?
played Quest for the Frozen Flame and encountered a moose should understand
moose.
the power of real animals. But yes,
Yeah.
As a native
Mike, do you want to
Alaskan,
take us
I have
home?
seen actual moose get in conflicts with F-150s and just win, right? So, yeah, but a somewhat less obviously terrifying creature than the moose might be the starfish, which ended up being the inspiration for the mammoth land star that you see depicted here. This is a truly horrifying monster that is capable of regrowing its limbs, detaching them when things are going poorly, and also just straight up spitting its stomach out to swallow somebody and then digesting them while they're still alive. Pretty much your standard starfish, but just a lot bigger than normal, and a little bit of the dire treatment there. Yeah,
Yeah,
and you don't want to
starfish
get
are.
poked by.
I'm
Please
just
go
saying,
ahead,
starfish
my
are very
Hawaiian friend.
carnivorous. Starfish are very carnivorous, and people forget that. And the only reason they don't eat us is because they're only about this big. But I
it's
have
true
been
of most
stung by a
animals.
starfish, and it's not a good time.
It's true of most animals if you really want to think about it. Your
But
chicken
this
eat you if it could.
if it could. So this book has a lot of creatures in it, but this is this is one of our rule books, and we want to give something for everyone. So in addition to a bunch of creatures that you can confront or befriend, and a bunch of you know archetypes that allow you to kind of use that take inspiration from animals or the natural world, some more items. We're also introducing 6 new playable ancestries, 2 of which we have already announced. Um, each ancestry is going to be represented by a member of the crew, so that's kind of how you get to know them a little bit. And the first one we have here is the Minotaur, so I think we'll go back to Mike a little bit here. This one.
Yeah, the Minotaur ancestry, I'm sure people have been very excited to see these enter the game. Dave Nelson did the initial design work on this, and then Jason Keeley and I did a fair bit of the development. To get one thing kind of right out of the gate here, they're large right off the bat. You want to play a Minotaur, you're a level 1 character. Good news, you're enormous. You're a large creature. You have a lot of really cool benefits that will tie into that. They're very strong. They're very tough. And as a bit of a caveat to that, if you don't want to play a large Minotaur, there are a variety of heritages, and the Little Horn Minotaur has all of the strength and toughness of your standard Minotaur, but it's medium. So if being large is something that maybe is not actually a benefit in the campaign you're going to be playing in, you have that option available to you. You can still have pretty much all of the strength, power, and access to cool ancestry feats of any other Minotaur, but in a nice compact package. The feats for this are so fun, honestly. The Minotaur has such a cool variety of different entertaining things it can do. A lot of stuff that leans into stonework, masonry, really evoking a lot of those traditional mythologies and building on them in cool ways. You do, of course, have things like labyrinth lore and other connections to mazes and abilities that come into play. One of, I think, the really fun things with the Minotaur is they're very large, right? But they're also a kind of frightening hunter being in some stories and in some of the execution here. So there are things like alarming disappearance, where the Minotaur is huge, it's imposing, and then it just kind of disappears. And when you successfully hide, you're really terrified because you don't know where something that big just went. And if you are, a player who's run into something like this, that would be terrifying. But if you are a player who is doing this, that can be a really fun way to have something like a Minotaur Rogue, who is an unexpected but very, very effective and awesome creature to be piloting.
So, Mike, if I'm understanding this correctly, you want to go look up the Vigilante archetype and maybe take some inspiration from certain famous men dressed as animals.
Perhaps so. Yeah.
I really like this, and
also,
I think it has a lot of nice little ties back to some very kind of some of the Greek mythology. I know Dave really put his classics background to work there.
Yeah. One thing before we move along to the next ancestry in here, we cannot let this pass without telling people that Minotaurs do have their very own friendly fling action for when your very large friend needs to fastball special an ally into position.
And with that, Logan, why don't you? I have resisted the urge to segue. Logan, why don't you talk about the other ancestry we have?
All right, the other one we're going to talk about today, of the ones we're actually revealing, is the Centaur. The Centaur are kind of a nomadic people who protect their lands, who trot about and are very skilled with, as you can see here, bows and lances and other kind of traditional weapons of their Centaur culture. They are also large because they got the body of a horse, right? And they also can become medium if you want to be maybe a little bit more of a little Sebastian vibe. You can do kind of more of a pony type of centaur, but you could also have powerful hooves with your heritage choice, or you could have a mottled coat that makes it easier for you to sneak about in different environments. But you could also take something that is more tied to kind of their magical side, because green speakers and faith speakers are important religious figures among centaurs, and so you can take the budding speaker heritage to kind of start on your magical path and then expand that with feats along the line. They also have a lot of skill with herbalism. They have strong cultures of mentorship and competition that they can kind of tap into. So they're a really kind of well-rounded and interesting ancestry who can also just get trample and just stomp over a lot of people. So there's a lot of variety with these that can let you play a pretty wide swath of characters.
Yeah, so that's about all we're going to say on Hall of the Wild at the moment. The book's pretty early, but we wanted to give you all a chance to kind of see what we've been cooking up and what's coming down the line a bit later. So yeah, look forward to finding out about more stuff, more creatures, some more of the archetypes, and some more of the ancestries. And I think just to tease some of the speculation on what's coming out there, I think I'll say that these are the two that we have that are primarily Greek. The rest are not. And I would say one of them is totally brand new. So yeah.
All right. With that, I think we're going to switch over to Q&A in a second here. I think we have a few questions loaded up, but this is also a great time to ask some. We're fairly close to time, so we can probably fit in like maybe 4 or 5 questions. Mike, do you have some cool questions lined up?
Yeah, so this one I know that we have an answer to, and has been a point of consideration that James Case has been keeping in mind pretty much since we started concepting the Centaurs, and that is, are there options so that allies can ride your Centaur character and fight together?
Yeah, I think the idea of, centaur is derived from a horse. So we already have some rules for if, for instance, like if a sprite, which is tiny, wants to ride on an ally's shoulder. And definitely, if you want to be a centaur and you want to specialize in this, you will kind of have a way to make the idea of, your halfling friend is sitting on your back shooting off arrows. Work a little bit easier for them because you are you have trained to not let them get in the way and to help be more effective as a team on the field.
Yeah. Another question here, and I will go ahead and answer this one since I did a bit of work on the answer. Are there any barbarian options in Rage of Elements? Yes, there is an elemental barbarian instinct in Rage of Elements. And I will also say, as a bit of a heads up to folks, there is no longer an Iron Druid archetype in Rage of Elements because we just didn't need it anymore when the remaster happened. We were able to use that space to give even more magical goodness. And we didn't need an archetype to give druids metal armor because we just gave that to all of the druids without requiring a class archetype.
Yeah, a lot of opportunities opened up for them when a whole plane of metal showed up. Like, oh, maybe we're cool with this actually. Maybe that's fine.
Logan, there's a question here about AoE impulses. Can you say about that?
There's going to be a decent number of those. The area of effects, multi-target stuff is one thing we have to be pretty careful about. So there are going to be a fair number of them. You'll find with a lot of kineticist abilities, because they aren't limited in how often they use them, a lot of them are going to be things that, create a zone that they need to maintain or that, have some ancillary effect. There aren't a whole lot of just like, oh, I'm going to explode everybody in this area and just do it round after round. There are certain elements that lean more into that play style, and you're definitely going to have some options, but you're also not going to be, literally casting fireball.
This is going to be a critical one that the whole group is probably going to have to weigh in on. So brace yourselves. This is a really, really good question, and I think we really need to give it some serious deliberation. And the question is, are Donde Leche great ancestry versatile heritage combo or best ancestry versatile heritage combo?
I'm going to go
I
with
don't know.
great.
You can't get the poppet in there, so we're just going to stick with great.
It's just so hard to displace the Gord Leshy from my heart. So I'm going to go with great.
That's fair. It seems like we got time for a couple more
Mike,
questions.
we didn't get an answer out of you.
Oh, okay. I'm going to, I was gonna defer to the wisdom of the group there, but I have to say, it is really good. But having played a Dhampir Leshy before, I don't know that I can call Ardande Leshy the best versatile heritage ancestry combo.
Kind of a blood orange kind of vibe.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
It's the Balkan watermelon vampires, which I'm not making up. Google it.
I have a really easy question here. Mike, you forgot the most terrifying thing about the starfish. The question, what is the ecological niche for the starfish?
Oh, well, we did call it the Mammoth Land Star, right? So this isn't just something that is going to find you while you're swimming or walking on the beach. No, it can find you just about anywhere you might be. Uh,
And it can expel air from its tube feet to glide off the ground slightly, so you'll never even hear it coming.
yes, yes,
Over starfish?
all of the terrifying power of Godzilla combined with the stealthy movements of a rogue.
Is there any maybe one or two last quick ones we can get in here to? And then after that, we will, we'll be around for the con, and we might be able to answer a few more. But let's see if we can get any last quick ones in here.
I did see one wondering why, if Tianxia was connected, if we were going to explain why Tianxia doesn't consider air an element. Well, I mean, some of it does, just for the record. Minkai has the Greek elements plus void. But in the case of mainland Tianxia, they look at air and it's just like, well, it's air. Here's the air. Do you see anything? I don't see anything. It's just sort of they recognize it exists, but it's what do you call this stuff? So
Yeah,
One
all
of
of
the
the
things
all
I
of the philosophies are kind of where you put your emphasis and your understanding of it, right? Because there are planes for all of these, but whether you consider the plane of air to be oh, that's a plane with a discrete element, or if you consider it more of a transitional space between two things, there are a lot of kind of different ways they can slice that up.
I mean, keep in mind that the elemental plane of air just sort of wraps around the universe, and so from the point of view from a lot of people, it's just the sky. It's not.
Yeah.
You might go up there and be
there's
like, "Well,
a
this isn't a different plane." And in
there's a
fact,
great
if you go back to the Mwangi Expanse, the dwarves made that same mistake and broke into the sky. It's just like we're just going up.
There's a great little bit talking in the beginning about the elements kind of from a philosophical standpoint, and it talks about other elemental philosophies. And I'm just going to read a sentence here that I like, which is Goblin elementalism recently caught my eye as well, as their elements can seemingly be any 8 to 10 nouns, with a hierarchy based on the subjective necessity of said noun for an individual. More often than not, sleep, food, drinks, and fire end up being the most significant. I just love that.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Element of
I
sleep.
see a couple
Ah.
like kineticist mechanical questions. I'll answer real quick. One is, how do blasts work differently from the playtest? I will note there is a playtest analysis blog that has a lot of this information. So if you really want to dig deep into some of the mechanical changes, I'd point you there on Paizo.com. But in short, the blasts use the same class DC as everything else. So now we have kind of an impulse attack roll version of the stat that's kind of analogous to spell attack roll that uses your constitution, and it kind of simplifies some things down for the kineticist. Another question I see on here is, does the kineticist have healing ability? And that is going to depend on your choice of element. Because the elements of water and wood in particular have some focus on healing ability, and you can kind of go down that path if you want to.
I think that's about all the time we have for this panel.
Yeah, I will throw one last one out that people have been asking for, and there's been some curiosity about, well, what if I want to deal cold damage or electricity damage? There is a versatile blasts feat that kineticists can take to expand the damage types their elements can do. So if you want to play a wood kineticist who, instead of just, the piercing and slashing damage of their wood, can also deal poison, or if you want to have a metal kineticist also be able to deal electricity. Those options do exist for people, and you do have the ability to tap into a broader array of damage types than you saw during the playtest. So,
There's also some elements have a choice built into Elemental Blast to start with. So, like water can be bludgeoning or cold. There are a couple other elements like that are in the Elemental Blast text that is probably blown out. But maybe somebody will catch that. If not, they'll have to wait till
Good luck.
later this year.
Good luck. We're out of time, y'all.
All right.
Indeed, we are. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this panel. Let's do one quick last go round. Tell us where people can find you on social media or not find you, whichever you prefer. I am at Logan Bonner on Twitter. I'll mention that one. And then I will kick it over to James.
I am James. My Twitter is in the overlay because I didn't plan things very well. And I will be around in the Discord all weekend. So have a good con, everyone.
Hi, I'm Eleanor. Do not perceive me online. It's for the best for everyone.
And I'm Michael Sayre. You can find me at Michael J. Sayre1 on Twitter. I also usually spend a fair amount of time on the Pathfinder 2e subreddit, and I'll be available on the Paizo Discord through the weekend here.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Everybody enjoy the rest of your PaizoCon, and we'll see you soon. Let us know when these books come out what you think of them. Bye, everybody.